Hello, world. Welcome to the Vaping Unplugged podcast. Everything you need to know about vaping and tobacco harm reduction.
Hello and welcome to our next Vaping Unplugged episode. In this series, we want to provide you with the most relevant and up-to-date news around vaping and harm reduction in general. This week, as you might have already seen, the UK has announced new measures to support vaping, which is great and encouraging. But so far, obviously, it's only an announcement. And that's why we invited one of the top harm reduction experts in general, but even more so for the UK, Martin Cullip, with us. And we will talk with him a little bit about the implications of this announcement and also the next steps. So what's going to happen after this announcement. Martin is International Fellow of the Taxpayers Alliance and also an expert on harm reduction and UK politics in general. Welcome, Martin, and thank you for joining us today. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm pleased to be here. Thanks, Michael. Good to talk to you. So I have to apologise in advance. I have a cat that's addicted to whenever I talk to someone online. So
that is definitely not a definitely not a problem, because my dog might join us as well at some point. So all good, all good. I would suggest maybe we start with that you give us a quick introduction to yourself and what you're doing right now and what your field of work is at the moment.
I'm Martin Cullip. I've been sort of writing about harm reduction since I think 2008, so quite a long time. I was a former associate and then trustee and chair of the New Nicotine Alliance. But I used to run a transport company. I sold that in 2021, and now I'm a harm reduction advocate consultant, if you like, and I'm contracted at the moment to the Taxpayers Alliance Consumer Centre in Washington, DC. And enjoying doing a lot of stuff. We've been doing a lot of stuff this year on COP10, the meeting in November. But obviously, I keep an eye on many countries, but I live in the UK, so I'm very cognizant of what's going on over here.
Please let's leave out COP10 for now at this discussion, because it's one of the most frustrating issues, I think, which we can deal with. So I'm not jealous of you about that. But maybe let's talk about the positive news of this week, and that's definitely the UK. So what did the health minister actually announce, and what do you think about the ideas he told us?
Well, yeah, this has been coming for a while. He answered a few parliamentary questions saying that his response to last year's Khan review, independent tobacco review by Javed Khan, which the government commissioned, he was going to respond to that and come out with the government's smoke-free 2030 proposals. And we did fear there would be some pretty bad things in there. We'd had in the UK for the last 2 or 3 months, it's been incessant poor media, really bad media across the board. I mean, the Daily Mail, I think a couple of weeks ago, had one day where they had 3 anti-vaping articles in one day. So there's been a lot of effort, concerted effort by bad actors in the space to try and influence what's going to happen with this. And Neil O'Brien, who's the public health minister, announced a set of proposals which were overall quite sensible. His headline proposes where he's going to continue the swap to stop scheme, which has been trialled in local areas, but he's going to bring it out nationwide. And he predicted they were going to give away free vaping starter kits to 1 million smokers. They're offering incentives to pregnant women to quit smoking, and that again is something that's come from trials previously in Glasgow, the Northwest, Manchester, and Northern Ireland, and that they're financial incentives where they offer them up to £400 to quit smoking, and apparently these have been twice as effective as other measures to try and help pregnant women quit smoking. He's announced £3 million of funding for a vapes enforcement squad, which is going to be led by Trade and Standards, Consumer Protection Agency in the UK, and it's going to look at preventing the supply of illicit and underage sales of vaping products. And he's also announced a consultation into allowing cigarette pack inserts with positive messages to help people to quit smoking. On top of this, he's also released a call for evidence for further ideas on how to reduce youth vaping. And I've read that there are things in there that I think our opponents would jump upon and try and, encourage the minister to go for bans on disposable products, plain packaging, extra taxation, and that sort of thing. But it does give us a chance to get our ideas across of how better to regulate and just enforce the laws we've already got on youth vaping, rather than bring in things that are going to be counterproductive and less likely to encourage people to quit smoking by vaping.
Yeah, I was really worried, as you mentioned, the last few months when we heard all these stories about new taxation and those kind of things, or even bans of vaping products, and told every British person I met, please make sure that the last beacon of hope is not going to be teared down for the international community. Otherwise, we don't have any country anymore to point at and say they get it, and they do it right. So I think that was kind of a relief. And for me personally, the one announcement he made which was a bit overlooked, I think, is especially this info sheets in cigarette packs, because that would be the best targeted, not advertisement, information, how to reach smokers and actually inform them about the actual risks of different products, those kind of things. But there is no further information, right? What will be on this info sheets or something like that already?
No, they're just saying they have a consultation on it. But I've seen this in other countries. I've seen IQOS, for example, advertised in Marlboro boxes I think it was in Italy or some country in Europe. But I don't think it'll be that if it happens. I think it'll just be advising smokers to go to a stop smoking service, or it might advise them one of the options is an e-cigarette, but I most certainly won't be branded, I don't think, even if they mention e-cigarettes at all. But yeah, you're right. It's the best way of targeting smokers. You can't be accused of targeting anything at youth or non-smokers if you're putting it in cigarette packs. You're targeting the smokers themselves. So the reason I think this hasn't happened before is because we have regulations on tobacco packaging which say that you can't put any information in the tobacco pack at all. So they'll have to amend the legislation on that. But I don't think that would be too much of a problem. But yeah, it's a common sense idea, and we very much welcome that, I think.
Yeah, it's baffling that no country so far has come up with the idea, oh, let's tell smokers in the cigarette pack. Not maybe a best case scenario about alternatives, but at least about where to go to and find information how to quit. But yeah, we'll see. I'm really hopeful that we will see that, because then we can also have studies about this and see the effectiveness, and maybe other countries. And I'm pretty sure if the messaging is right, this will be very effective, and then other countries hopefully follow that lead. And I think the other very interesting aspect you mentioned, and it's also because of the negative lead up, this youth issue and vaping epidemic, I even read, is in the UK. And do you see, and do the numbers show, an actual youth vaping epidemic in the UK?
It's been largely overblown. There was an uptick in the last reports from the the NHS, and from Action on Smoking and Health, but it's still pretty low level. I think it's only 1.7% of never smokers are regular vapers in the underage category. So it's still just experimental and very, very low level, but it's grown into a bit of a moral panic like it is everywhere else. I think people want to talk up this problem. I personally think, well, what would these kids be doing if they weren't using vaping? I'm a guy in my 50s, and I look back to when I used to go to sports events, the same places I go now, but I see people now in their 20s vaping. Very, very few. I see very few of them smoking. But I know 20 years ago, those same age groups would have been smoking. So I look around and I think, I'm quite encouraged by it all. But there are doom-mongers, and there are, people who are quite Puritan who don't want to see kids using anything, which I think is rather unrealistic. So on a pragmatic view, I think it's all positive, but there are people who don't like that. And yeah, we don't want underage kids using the vapes, but if the alternative is that they would be picking up cigarettes instead, then it's I don't know. I think I've said all I can say about it. It's just unrealistic to say that kids aren't going to dabble in nicotine just like they dabble with drinking alcohol or anything else they're not supposed to do. In fact, there are more kids in the UK drinking alcohol than there are vaping, but no one seems to panic too much about that. And I don't remember when I was young there being much of a panic about kids smoking behind the bike sheds. Everyone thought it was just a bit mischievous, but now apparently vaping's come along and it's the end of the world. But I think the government in the UK has acted proportionally on this, and they are going to, like I say, enforce the laws we already have. It's not like we haven't got the laws. It's just that they're not working properly at the moment, and they need the funding for trading standards to enforce those laws is very, very welcome, because the industry has been calling for that as well.
Yeah, and I always get very frustrated when I read just the numbers of youth vaping or something like that, because that's only half of the story. You need at the same time look at the smoking numbers, and they are on record lows for all age categories in the UK, I think. So it can't be a gateway to smoking.
Yeah, if you look at it, 10 years ago there were more kids using nicotine. In 2010, there were more kids using nicotine than there are now. But back in 2010, hardly any of them were vaping. They were all smoking. So I think it was about 12% of kids were smoking in 2010. And now I think it's down to about 8%, even at the highest estimate, are vaping. And only 2%, I think, are smoking. So overall nicotine use has gone down, let alone smoking use by youth. And that should be something we should be quite pleased about.
Definitely. So, and for this announcement, what are the next political steps, or how does the process looks like? Because right now it's just an announcement, and not a specific law or in place yet. What are the next steps?
Well, the government, I think, is going to go forward with its main proposals: the swap to stop scheme, and the £3 million for the task force, and the incentives for pregnant women. The cigarette packs has got to go to consultation, and the further measures is going to this call for evidence, which is an 8 weeks call for evidence. They'll be asking for people to submit to that, and then it says that 12 weeks after that they'll consider the evidence and come out with whatever proposals that result from that. So you're talking about best part of 6 months before anything happens over and above what was announced there. But it'll take a while, but I think it's proportionate, and I think it's a good start on the smoke-free 2030 thing. Obviously, as someone who's heavily into harm reduction, I'd love to see them go much further by legalizing snus and embracing heated tobacco and nicotine pouches more. But at least it's going heavily on vaping, and it's putting a stall out for the UK government to say, look, we believe in vaping, and I don't care what's happening around the rest of the world. We're going to carry on. So yeah, it's good in that respect.
Yeah, now you gave away already the answer to my final question, basically, because I was about to ask if you think if they will go through with the measures as announced, if that would be enough to reach the 5% goal, or if you want to see something else. Obviously, the snus aspect is always very interesting, because there is another country, or there is one country in the EU where it's allowed, and they will reach the smoke-free goal this year. So maybe, or do you think the UK could or should take the chance of being non-EU member now to legalize new products as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think they'll make the smoke-free target by 2030. I think that's a pipe dream. But if they wanted to make a proper attempt at it, then yeah, they should legalize snus. I think smoking rates in Sweden are now down to 5.6%, I think they are, and they're predicted by the WHO to be under 5% this year. So they're going to be celebrating. And the EU smoke-free target is 2040. They're going to be 17 years ahead in Sweden of everyone else. So if the government did go all in on sort of harm reduction, I think they have a much better chance than they have at the moment. But they have to be conservative. I think they have so many voices against them. If they were to do that, they just get slaughtered in the press. So we should be grateful for what they're doing on vaping, and just hope sometime they see sense and do the same with other harm reduction products as well.
Cool. With that, I would like to make a hard switch, but not really a hard switch, because we touched a little bit on some vaping myths in general already. But the Tolos Foundation, which is also affiliated, I think, with the Taxpayers Protection Alliance, published also this week a report on harm reduction and included some of the most common myths and debunked them. So the youth gateway argument we already covered a little bit, and before we started recording, we already talked a little bit about one of our favorite or least favorite, whatever you want to call it, myths about nicotine in general. And I think that applies especially for all the harm reduction products and hurts the legalization or implementation of those products. And that so many people think nicotine is the actual problem and nicotine causes cancer. And since we talk about the UK, I would be especially interested if this myth is also prevalent in the UK, or is it somehow better there because vaping is more common and more embraced by public health and politicians?
No, firstly, Tholos is affiliated with Americans for Tax Reform, not the TPA.
Oh,
but I do know guys there.
We cut that out.
No, that's fine. That's fine. No, we can talk about it. It's because I think it's a good document. Carl Abrahamson, I know there from Tholos, and Tim Andrews at ATR. The thing about nicotine is it's not different in the UK, unfortunately. There's still a confusion of it, but this is where some of these proposals from the public health minister will come in, because if he's saying that we're going to give 1 million products to smokers, 1 million vape products to smokers, then that's going to ease concerns among smokers who thought that maybe nicotine was dangerous. Well, the government's telling me that I can have this, so there can't be that much wrong with it. And also the idea that the government is endorsing these products, that's going to send a message to GPs and to medical types that, well, if the government is right behind these things, then maybe I can have more confidence in recommending these to smokers. And I think the nicotine and tobacco confusion will hang around for quite some time yet, but hopefully eventually some people will realize it's just the same kind of thing as caffeine. And if caffeine was smoked, they'd probably be scared about caffeine previously, or if we drank nicotine in a drink, they probably would think, oh, I love my nicotine in the morning, I can't function without it. And that would be something that everyone would just talk to each other like they do about coffee. But yeah, it's something we need to carry on sending that message. But hopefully with new, more liberal stuff coming from the government on vaping, then hopefully people will learn that over time.
Yeah, as an Austrian, I remember the scaremongering when Red Bull was introduced, and this would ruin a whole generation, obviously, but turned out quite well, actually. Luckily, Red Bull is not vaped, so that's probably a good thing for that. But what do you think? Maybe as a last question, should vapers or harm reduction activists and basically everyone in our field do to fight and debunk these myths? What is the best strategy? Because to get this actual truths into media, politician circles, those kind of things, I think is the hardest one to break.
I don't know. I think it's happening naturally anyway. I mean, there can't be many families in the country and in the UK anyway, and maybe it's the same in other countries, especially in lower socioeconomic areas and poorer neighborhoods, who don't know someone who vapes or who uses one of these safer products. And I think they talk to each other. And I think many families are really probably quite happy to see someone who they may never have thought would quit smoking using a vape. I know that's happened in my family because they never thought I'd quit smoking. So I think over time, it's going to spread by word of mouth. And I think a lot of the bad press, sometimes you read the comments underneath the Daily Mail and some people just aren't taking it. They're just saying, we don't care what you say. We know these things are left harmful, and they falsely accuse them of taking money off Big Tobacco. They say, oh, who's paid for this advert? Big Tobacco. But the fact that they think someone must have an agenda and that they're ignoring those stories proves that it must be getting out. And I think it's word of mouth doing it. And just by people who vape telling others who don't vape or their family members or friends what their experiences are, and the messages are getting out that way. So I think that's happening naturally anyway. But again, it will take time.
Fantastic. I think that's a very, very good ending for the podcast. So thank you again for joining us, and we will hold our thumbs for the UK to push through with at least those measures which are a step in the right direction, and obviously hope they go a little bit further so that our beacon of hope country stays there and we can point the EU to the UK. in the future. And thank you for your time and talking to us. Hopefully to see you soon again.
Can I say just one thing, just to finish? I know you said we don't want to talk about COP10, but I just would like to say that there are a lot of threats coming from the WHO. So consumers should write to their elected representatives. I think NNA has got a good campaign going. I think there's one going to start in Italy. So please take that seriously, and also look out for the Taxpayers Protection Alliance conference. We're going to do a mini conference in Panama this year to coincide with the event. So look out for details of that, and we'll tell you more nearer the time. But yeah, thanks very much for having me, Michael. It's been great talking to you.
Maybe quickly you can add, we will link everything, but tell us as well where we can find you and the information about those kind of things.
Well, we've only just sort of like we've only just decided to go ahead with it, so we haven't got full details, but we're hoping to get consumers, advocates, academics, journalists, hopefully some politicians or whatever over to Panama and just host a few little panels and get some networking sessions going, and just just get the proper word out there, as opposed to the stuff that would be going on in the conference. Hopefully we'll be close to where it is. We might hopefully be doing something over the road or something, but yeah, that's what the plans are. So just look out for any details once we have them.
Cool. So for now, we will all follow you on Twitter and see as soon as announcements are out there.
Yeah. So at Nanny Free State. So
cool. Yeah. Thank you again. Take care and all the best.
Yeah. Thanks, Michael. Bye.